welcome to RoundURS. On today's episode, we're going to be speaking to Ray Williams. Ray Williams is a good friend of my father's. They go back a long time. And basically, when I first started RoundURS, I wanted to find out about people's musical journeys and their influences. You know, I love learning about new music. In this episode, we talk about Ray growing up in Grenada, what it's like growing up in London in the 70s, and we also talk about a whole array of soul music. Let's get into this one.
Now, you know, Ray's collection is an extension of my dad's collection, essentially. And what I love about this episode is I got a real chance to sit with the man and talk to him about his influences, his upbringing, and some of the things that inspired him to pick some of the songs that he picked for the mix. Really enjoyed this episode, and I hope you do too.
Mr. Ray Williams.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Man.
International RoundURS, the first edition. Not quite RoundURS.
Round your daughters.
Yeah. Round your daughters, yeah.
Round my daughters.
So, tell the people a little bit about yourself, our relationship, your relationship to the family, XYZ.
So, well, before you were 6'6", you were a lot smaller, and I knew you from back then when you were a kid, and obviously in large part because of the very close relationship I have with your father, dating back to maybe 1981, I think. So we've known each other a long time, he and I. You and I have known each other since you were born. You know, I don't live here anymore, but where I grew up, I think was kind of part of it. Started off in the islands, in Grenada, in fact. So Grenadian by birth, spent probably the first 8 or 9 years there before coming to the UK. But by way of background, I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm a brother to siblings, I'm a cook, I'm a traveler, I'm a wine enthusiast, and I love my music.
Yeah.
You know?
I like that intro. What interested me just about what you were just talking about just then, Grenada. Talk to me a little bit about Grenada. And also, like, that's quite a young age as well. You say you left Grenada at 10, was it?
9.
9?
Yeah, just before I was 9.
So, in that time, can you remember a lot of, like, the culture, the music from that time?
Absolutely. So, I think part of the situation ends up being that there are certain things that you sort of like clipped into your mind in a way that you'll never forget. So those first 9 years of my life are extremely special because it was a different environment, different people. Like, you know, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather were bringing me up. And that was not so unusual because, you know, the Windrush generation, there's probably a lot more about it more recently. But my parents were part of that generation that left the islands and came to the UK and left their kids behind to be brought up by by family, essentially. And that was the case with me. So nothing substantially strange or different in that regard if you happen to know other people from the islands who were part of that generation. Yeah.
Cool. And when you came to the UK, where were you based?
Clapham. Clapham Common.
Okay, up the road from
exactly. Right, that's where I grew up.
It's changed a lot now, right?
It's changed a lot. It's extremely gentrified, and even before I left for Canada, it was known as Clam.
Yeah. Okay, so Clapham then was what to you, like?
Well, Clapham was, the center of all things. Brixton was like, maybe a mile and a half away.
Yeah.
Right. I went to school on the north side, on the south side of the Common, Henry Thornton, right next to the pond. Big pub across the street. We had a Catholic boys' school next door to ours. Clapham High Street and Clapham Common. The tube station was just down the road to the right, and down the road to the left was Clapham South. And I lived literally across the Common.
So growing up in Clapham at that time, especially being so close to Brixton, it must have been a whole, melting pot of cultures, like it is now. But I think at that time there was something special either happening or about to happen.
Well, I would say that at least I felt it was more cohesive when I look back. Sometimes you're not necessarily aware of what you have at the time, but the opportunity to look in the rearview mirror,
of course,
and take a look, and it's like, so there was a lot of stuff going on, because now we're talking about the early 70s. We just Labour government. We're moving from pounds, shillings, and pence, and I'm really dating myself, right? To the new money, and there was a whole generation of young folks like myself age 11, 12, starting to get a consciousness about who we are, right? And all the areas around. So, you know, you're talking Clapham, you're talking Balham, you're talking Norwood, Brixton, Wandsworth. You knew people from all of those areas, right? And there was this engagement that was going on, even with the young folks at the time.
Talk about that sort of like that synergy, that, you know, like having that awareness as a teen, was it? As a teen going to church?
Yeah, so now you're talking, like I said, you know, look, I went to Henry Thornton School. Henry Thornton was a school that had something like 1,500 students of all races, all boys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Madness.
So, pure madness. But
Dad's told me stories about St. Bon's as well, you know what I mean?
The interesting thing about it, though, was the school used to be a grammar school. So the first couple of years, we had all the trappings of a grammar school, right? A master came into the room, you stood. You know, you wore a uniform. You know, as you're probably well aware, no one ever got called by their first name. It's always your surname. You know, Wallace boy, come here.
Yeah.
Williams boy, come here. You know, all of that. So it was kind of interesting from that perspective. But the more we went into the kind of comprehensive school system, the more sort of, you know, radical I would say it became, because the difference was that from wearing a school uniform, we got to start wearing, you know, little, kerchiefs in our back pockets. And then the music at the time, you know, with a lot of like Jamaican kids in particular, you would try and be like them, right? In terms of you following the music, which is reggae music. You know, everyone would be like liar, and you know, man would wear silk scarf in a man back pocket.
Yeah.
So you know that was part of the influence at the time, and so that also led to how you appreciated or embraced music. Okay, so a lot of reggae music going on from that perspective, but what was happening at home was again very different. You know?
So at what point did you sit there and say, okay, this music, this culture is having an impact on my life, I'm going to step out and buy that first record?
That's a good one, because I think it's one of those things that happens very organically. There's a lot of stuff that's going on around you, and the stuff that's going around you impacts you in ways that you don't necessarily appreciate, or at least consciously appreciate. And so there's stuff going on, and as the stuff is going on, you're taking it in, and it's making you not necessarily realize, but it's certainly allowing you to make decisions based on what's happening, right? And so, you know, you had all manner of music going on. Back then, you know, it was always the sort of funk and the soul coming out of the US, right? And that was a large part of the influence. But another part of the influence was literally all the record shops, the black record shops that sold reggae music in particular in Brixton, in Clapham Junction, in Peckham, where I used to work on a Saturday. So you'd go in there and just listen to tune, you know, and listen to the tune. You'd like, yeah, man, want that.
Yeah.
But in terms of that first record, interestingly enough, it was not a reggae record. It was a soul tune, and the group was called Sine, S-I-N-E.
Oh yeah.
And two great tracks. One in particular, Just Let Me Do My Thing, was fantastic, and Happy's the Only Way. Those were the two major tracks, but they weren't really the reason why I purchased my first album.
I think I know what you're getting at here.
On the album cover, there was this very gorgeous looking woman, and she was sitting in a particular pose with a skirt with lots of good legs showing. I'm like, I want that album.
It's funny you say that, because I went through my dad's record collection as well, and there was some very, very dodgy songs in there, but the artwork, I was thinking, maybe I can see why this was purchased.
So you know why we get along.
Yeah, I know you're getting there.
Very questionable individuals.
Cool. So that's the first record that you bought.
That's probably the first record I certainly remember buying reasonably. And I should also mention that part of the reason I never really purchased record is that my dad was an avid record collector.
And he had a lot of them.
Well, you know, when I think back, you know, my dad used to like to buy records, and he used to love to dance. So, you know, I'll Take You There is one of the tunes, you know, and anything on the Stax label is one of those things that you just remember, right? And he'd be throwing down tunes. He loved to dance. Him and Mom used to like to go out, you know.
What did he do? Was he a music guy?
No,
Creative guy?
no, absolutely not. My dad worked for London Transport. My dad came to the UK. He was actually a tailor by training, but you know the reason why my parents and lots of other parents came was to fill in positions in the UK that couldn't be filled. So he ended up as someone working for London Transport, and eventually ended up as a station manager at one of the tube stations.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because, like when I first went and got my record, the first record I bought, or I can't remember specifically what that was, but I knew I wanted to sort of embark on this journey as a DJ. I saw what was happening out there and I was like, I want to be a part of that. I want to add to the culture.
Right.
And, I think this came up in Dad's episode as well. It seems interesting, the difference between the two generations. I don't speak for my whole generation, but it seems like a lot of you guys, they had the cultural aspect there, but you just wanted to get a couple of records, man. It wasn't so much about being part of being the DJ that was going to be, behind that rapper or behind that. It was just, want to be a part of it.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. If I was to look back to those formative years, especially what I referenced as the early mid-70s, there's a lot of stuff going on, right? In the early parts of the 70s, I'd have to say that in large part we waited for the soul records coming out of the US. You'd pay more money than you should for those. You'd wait for the dub plates coming out of Jamaica, and you'd be spending money and stuff. And you were involved in a scene. We're all involved in a scene. Me, I love the reggae scene. I love the soul scene, the disco scene. You named it. I would be involved, and I was involved, and went to everything. I had a bunch of guys by the mid-70s where we're all now 16, 17, moving on, playing cricket on a Sunday, then going out Sunday night, playing cricket on a Saturday, going out Saturday night. Saturday nights was just all about where we went. There was so much stuff going on that's not unusual that we'd end up at 2-3 parties, and the parties would be different. And if we didn't like the parties, we'd end up at a club. Maybe All Nations in Hackney back in the day was just an interesting place, to say the least.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that in terms of let's talk about some of the clubs. Let's talk about some of the places, the hot spots that you were going around to, because I think Dad's mentioned Nations as well.
So what I'd say is that there were so many different clubs. In terms of the club scene was very, very good from memory. Global Village, which was in Charing Cross back in the day, was very interesting because it was really all races, all manner of music. It was just fantastic, right? Then there were places like Crackers, which is just one of those classic places that you used to skip school for and go on a Friday afternoon.
Central London, this was
in Central Wardour Street. Okay, and there was a really good record shop on Wardour Street as well. Then 100 Club on 100 Oxford Street, Monk Breeze on Jermyn Street, Titanic in the West End. Then some of the reggae clubs like Studio 2000 right here in Tooting Bec near the station. There would be Palm Tops, oh my goodness, Palm Tree in Edmonton, North London. There was so many.
You was really going
up, man.
Down, left, right.
Man went everywhere, right?
There was no Uber them times either, so what is it, black cab?
No, so what it was is like, you'd hook up. There was a really good friend of ours, Keith Thompson, who was driving well before any of our peers.
It's always good to have a driver,
five of us would hook up all the time, and worst case, you'd club together and get a minicab.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
And that was the thing.
Yeah.
So it would be a bad night if you didn't at least hit 2 parties on a Saturday night.
I hear you.
Plus a club.
I hear you. So the clubs was a place where a lot of the music and stuff was, being consumed, absorbed.
Right.
I guess there was a vibe that was being caught from there.
There was a definite vibe. And I should mention as well that back then there were a number of really good radio DJs like Greg Edwards on a Saturday night on Capital Radio, Robbie Vincent, David Rodigan. Like Roddy used to play on a Saturday night, then you'd go down to a club in the West End, right, where he was dropping tunes as well. And David Rodigan, like in a lot of respects, almost single-handedly, where reggae music is concerned, has promoted reggae music in such a fashion.
Yeah, Rodigan's a legend, man.
He is a legend.
100%.
How many reggae artists would have had the opportunity to play at the Royal Albert Hall if it wasn't for Rodigan. Not just recently, right?
Yeah.
Strange as it may seem.
So out of all of the genres that let's go back to those times. What was your quote unquote like favorite, or the one that you were most invested in?
I think Lovers Rock.
Yeah.
I think Lovers Rock. I mean, I'm a huge deep house fan to this day. I'm a huge fan when it comes to dub plates. I'm a huge fan when it comes to rockers and steppers, and I love conscious lyrics. I love the old school rap that again has consciousness about it. But Lovers Rock represented something substantially special to me at a time when I was understanding what it was to be black, young and black, right? Young, gifted and black, if you will. And the Lovers Rock scene and the Lovers Rock movement was something that was British made, right?
Yeah.
It was British made. Yes, there were Jamaican artists like Dennis Emmanuel Brown, Gregory Isaacs, a whole bunch of artists took advantage of what was going on here. But what you got to look at is what was going on here. So you had people like Claudia Fontaine, bless her socks. She passed away 2 years ago. Good friend of mine. She actually had a #1 hit with a copy of Bloodstone's Natural High, and that was on the reggae charts for a number of weeks. She was a very good friend of. I'm just trying to remember the young lady who sang with Soul to Soul, Karen Wheeler. So Claudia and Karen know each other from time, right? And I believe Karen was also part of 15, 16, 17. So back in the day, listen, the Lovers Rock movement was something that was owned by young black people, right? The Investigators was like one big group that did a whole bunch of things. Jean Adibambo's Paradise, bless her, because she's passed to. Carol Thompson. I mentioned Trevor Walters earlier on. There's just so many really, really good black British artists that contributed to the Lovers Rock scene. And the Lovers Rock scene was a sweet scene.
Yeah.
Because when you went out on a Saturday night, you went out looking crisp. Your afro was sweet, you know. Like, you'd have your gabici. It's a beautiful piece of Italian knitwear, with your little piece of suede. Hi, how are you? Some nice Fiorucci, some nice, sort of slacks, your crushed leather shoe. And then when you went to a party, you were like, it was
just a nice time.
That's pure nice time. That's what you went for.
Yeah.
Right? But what it represented was us creating culturally something that was ours. It wasn't, this is our parents' stuff from Jamaica, right? Or from anywhere else. It was stuff that was created by, I think, a generation looking to see who they were, what they were, and what they wanted to become.
Earlier you were talking about consciousness, and I think the way you ended that just now, it kind of goes full circle with that. Talk to me about how important that was in terms of like the lyrical content of the music at the time, because it seems something that was very important to you, something that had a message that you
Without
could connect.
Doubt.
You
Without
could connect
doubt.
yourself
So
to.
I'll tell you something. When we're talking about content and when we're talking about consciousness, one of my biggest influences to this day is Muhammad Ali, right? Because Muhammad Ali had a lot of stuff to say, but he could back it up. But he was also a person that gave me a very clear sense that greatness is available, right? Because here was a man who had no formal schooling, and I watched him school people on TV. Then I watched him school people in the ring, and I'm like, whoa. He made me feel good about what blackness was. He made me feel good about my possibilities and what it could look like, So for him, always, that would be, if you ask me who in this life or in the next life, I'd like to sit down and break bread with. I don't have many people that I say are my idols or my heroes. He's one of only 2, I would say, that I have.
Yeah, Ali's incredible. Like I definitely can relate to seeing him. Like, and I saw him at a time when he wasn't at his peak. You know, I don't know. It was probably like the 90s or early 2000s when I was taking in some of that footage.
Right.
And I was even like, that fire was ignited in me, like seeing him on how he'd conduct himself, how articulate he was, how intelligent, but at the same time, bad. You know what I mean? Like, he was bad. Like,
it's just
he was talking the talk and
pure niceness, man.
And I love that juxtaposition of like very, very intelligent, but at the same time, like gifted a gab, you can put him in any arena, any place, and you know,
I hear
bad
you.
up a reporter, bad up a
hear
boxer. You know what I mean? Cool. So we did discuss a little bit about pirate radio earlier, but I wanted to talk a little bit more about pirate radio because we spoke about the clubs and stuff.
Yep.
I just wanted to bring it back to where music was being consumed. So in terms of radio, like talk to me about commercial radio versus pirate radio. Like was a lot of this birthed on pirate radio? Was there anything on commercial?
So you know, you would get certain things on what might be deemed commercial radio because Capital was quite good on a Saturday night, as I mentioned, because they had a Greg Edwards show. And that allowed for a lot of really very good soul music to be played. Radigan, like I said, on his show would be doing a hell of a lot more stuff that was, you know, reggae influence. But at the end of the day, if you really wanted to hear crisp new biscuit, the pirate radios were where it's at, right? Soul or reggae music, right?
And did you have any time on pirate radio? Did you play?
No. Listen, at the end of the day, I was more always a consumer of music. I happened to be around a lot of people who were DJs. Steve Devon was a friend of mine from way back. Don't know where he is or what's happened to him. But way back when he was on pirate radio and he was doing a really good show. I'm just trying to remember the name of the pirate radio station right now, and I can't off the top of my head.
Right, we'll try and contact Steve.
Yeah, Steve.
On the back of this.
Yeah, Steve Devon was like, you know, brilliant. In fact, I think back and I remember very clearly the first time I heard Frankie Beverly was Steve Devon playing that to me at a friend's house up in Norbury, and I'm like, oh my God. We played that album probably that night, I don't know, like 6 times.
What an incredible
Seriously.
time.
It's just seriously, it's like...
What an incredible time.
Yeah.
I would, like, there's certain generations that, you know, of music or eras that I would love to go back to. And, like, definitely that period there, like Frankie Beverly and Mays, like, what an amazing album, man.
So you know, one of the things I think that made it sweeter is the fact that, unlike today, when, reasonably speaking, you can get anything just like right now, you know, pick up your iPad, pick up your phone and download stuff.
Yeah.
You would have to go and buy the stuff because you knew it was coming out, or you happened to be at the record shop that Saturday, you know, spending your little pennies, and you heard that, it's like, sorry, could you play that for me? And then you'd say, yeah, you'd take that, then you'd go home and you play the whole thing.
Yeah.
And there's a joy.
Yeah,
you know, there's a process and a joy to that whole thing.
It's a different type of transaction, isn't it?
Completely different.
It is.
Different type of experience as well.
Yeah, so the thing is, I think about with accessibility to music these days, in terms of radio and production, I think like there is some terrible music on the radio at the moment, and everyone complains about it. And you know, I'm definitely one of those people that complain about it. But equally, I think there's also, you have geniuses, you know, like who have, you know, they got a little bedroom set up, a little studio set up in their bedroom, and you know, like they can post their music on SoundCloud. They can be discovered, you know. It's such a saturated place, and there's so many voices, so much grey noise, white noise, whatever you want to call it at the moment. But, you know, like, I think what you were talking about in terms of having that whole experience, going out to get a record, listening to it, it's a beautiful experience. But at the same time, there's so much good music out there that people don't know about at the moment, you know what I mean?
Right.
No?
Right. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, for real, it's overwhelming. Talk to me about a few artists. So you sent me the playlist before we started the interview.
Yeah, I did.
And there was a few artists on there that I definitely wanted to sort of dive in and chat to you a little bit about. First of them being Bobby Caldwell.
Oh, my God.
Talk to me about your relationship with Bobby.
Well, there's no relationship to talk about. All I can tell you is that I still have that piece of vinyl at home that I bought, I don't know, 76 or 77, whenever it was that it came out. And, you know, there's a couple of great tracks on there in particular, and one which is like, I think will live forever simply because of how good it is, and as you're well aware, how often sampled it has been. And it took a while to find out that Bobby Caldwell was white.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting when you look at the album cover. You understand very clearly why they positioned the album cover in the way that they did. Him sitting on the bench, and the sort of the hat and everything else, and there is no sense of who cares, right? At the end of the day, this is still one of the best albums, some of the greatest songs you will have ever heard. It's just that simple.
Was that his first single, the one you were talking about? Was it what you want to do?
Love?
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But listen, who from my era and, you know, lots of people have come since don't know that tune.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it is a classic.
Yeah, classic.
You know?
And
it is a classic.
Heavily sampled as well.
Yeah,
I think
you know.
my favorite, out of all of the favorite versions I've heard of it, Tupac's is my favorite version.
Is that right?
Wicked, man. I'm going to throw it into the mix, in fact. I think when we play that in the mix. Another artist that I wanted to talk to you about, Dexter Wanzel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Life on Mars, baby.
Yeah.
Life on Mars. So Dexter Wanzel is, I found intriguing. So I'm a science fiction buff.
Yeah.
Right? So Dexter Wanzel, Life on Mars, and a lot of the stuff that he kind of dealt with, it seemed to me, had a lot to do with consciousness, understanding, you know, our world, and so on and so forth. So there was a natural sort of affinity to, like, you an album, Life on Mars. Oh, I'm mixing science fiction and soul music together. That's pretty good. But, you know, I mean, again, there's a guy, one of the best tunes I've ever heard, Sweetest Pain, and just, that would be something that's always on my playlist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dexter Wanzel, you know. So a lot of sort of different elements are brought into play at the same time, and you end up with something that's like, yo, this is the business.
So when you're chefing, when you're doing your food prep and all that, what music do you listen to?
So
Trap.
I tend to cook at weekends more than anything else, and in our house, the music just goes on. So it's a bunch of different things. So I'll give you a case in point. Right now, and I mentioned Lovers Rock before. So there is a station that I listen to, my wife and I listen to every Sunday, almost all day long, right? And it's just called Lovers Rock Radio, right? There's a young chap called DJ Bass that plays the Guinness Punch show, the Rice and Peace show, on a Sunday afternoon London time, but we listen to it in Toronto, right? And so it is like our breakfast show. So I'm cooking breakfast, and by the time I start getting prepped for dinner, there is an 80s show, and then by the time we're sitting down for dinner, there's another show. And but you know, that's kind of what I listen to at the weekend, unless you know, I put together my own playlist of stuff. And so generally speaking, my playlist, when I'm not listening to Lovers Rock in particular, will have a lot of deep house, right? Because deep soulful house puts me in this really beautiful place. You know, it's different.
I relate to you on that. I feel
right?
you.
You know, it's a feel good sound. Right, Lovers Rock is a feel good sound, but
different vibe.
Different vibe.
Yeah.
Deep soulful house, you hear it, and I just want to throw my hands up, and I want to dance, and I want to dance, and I want to dance. Right?
I relate to that.
Right?
I play a lot of soulful house myself, and you know, it catches you.
It does catch you.
It just catches you, and you get inside of it.
Absolutely.
Add a nice little melody on that, and you know, you're away.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, my good buddy David, he put on Shona Scoffrey, who, as far as I understand, you're related to.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Favorite artist. Right?
Yeah, I need to do a RoundURS with Shona. Reach out, make the family link, and that.
You know.
Yeah.
Seriously. So now, talk about talent. That man is super talented, and he's one of my favorite. He sings jazz. He sings deep soulful house. You know, he sings gospel. He can sing anything. Amazing voice, and truly talented. Yeah. There's a few. In fact, I need to try and dig that one out, see if I can get into the mix. Because, like I said, I play that all the time. You know what I mean? It's a wicked tune. It really is good.
Another tune that I liked from the playlist, another artist was Trevor Walters.
Yeah, man. So now we're talking Lovers Rock again.
So is that defined as Lovers Rock? Because I heard that and I was like, is that one of the tracks?
That was one of the tracks. Love Me Tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, man. So
because you know, by definition, my definition of Lovers Rock is a bit warped because I hear what Dad plays and Dad's played me, but you know, it's not been one of those genres that I've dived into and you know gotten to know.
Yeah.
There's other stuff he's played me and I've heard that and I've done my own research.
Right.
So I'm not that well versed with Lovers Rock.
Okay.
But that one's got a little bit more of a faster tempo to it. It's got more of a...
Yeah, but still, it's like, it falls solidly within that whole piece that represents Lovers Rock. Like, more importantly, I think you look back, and again, remember, I was talking about the Black British experience, something that was created that we felt was ours, right? You know, so, you know, you had people like Gene Adibambo, as I mentioned, you know, Paradise. You had Carol Thompson. You had a whole bunch of really, really good tunes, but Trevor Walters as well, Investigators. There's a whole bunch of groups that were, you know, one of my all-time favorites as well. I'm sort of going off here, but In Crowd, we play reggae, right? And that is like such a busting, bubbling tune. But go back to Trevor Walters. Just a gorgeous classic track. The boys from the British Collective, Junior, Omar, Noel McCoy, they actually did a really beautiful example of that same track last year, maybe the year before. Just outstanding, right? Love Me Tonight. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to be playing that one.
Sweet.
Yeah. One of the tracks you mentioned just then, the reggae one. I tried to find that one. I couldn't find it nowhere, you know.
Which one was that?
The Into Crowd.
We play reggae?
Oh, yeah, we play reggae, sorry. Yeah. I couldn't find that nowhere.
Stop it.
I couldn't find that.
Oh, such a good track.
Might have been my bad, but yeah, the others you said will definitely throw that into the mix. Cool. Something that I thought that was interesting that we just discussed. Black Britishness. That's the term that you've coined. I think that's a really interesting thing to talk about, especially you spending time here. Well, the majority of your life in the UK. Would you say?
Actually, would you believe? At this point in my life, I've now spent more time in Canada than I spent here or in Grenada.
So what was it like then, having this sort of, the black Britishness that you're talking about going across to Canada, and then it being a whole new world? Like, what was Canada like when you first touched down?
Well, it's kind of interesting. You go to Canada, and I work in Toronto, live just outside, and Toronto has a West Indian, a black community as well. It took a little time to sort of get to know a number of people within that community. But in large part, it's not so different from much of what I saw growing up here in the UK. The difference is, to my mind at least, here in the UK, what I observed, if I was to do a comparison, was that there was probably a greater degree of consciousness about establishing who we were as young black Brits, because we didn't fit into necessarily our parents' generation coming from the islands. And by the same token, having been born here, not myself in particular, but I'm talking about a particular generation, you were black and you were British and West Indian, but you were black and British, right? So, that was kind of what I was talking about. And that is why, to my mind, the Lovers Rock scene was important. That is why, seminal pieces of cinema like Babylon, and Burning an Illusion, two pieces of work that I think, 30, 40 years later has a lot of importance historically and otherwise for establishing what black British look like.
No, that's cool, man. So talk to me a little bit more about Canada then, and Toronto.
Yeah. So Toronto's got its own very interesting music scene. I don't think it's anywhere near as expansive as, what I saw and understand about what is the British scene. But, you got a whole bunch of brothers and sisters doing some interesting stuff from a soul perspective. The reggae scene is a decent one. I don't think, again, it's quite as bright as what I've known from the UK scene here. Yeah. But they got stuff going on, right? They got stuff going on. And one of the things that I think I miss the most, however, is that every once in a while I see that there is a bunch of my contemporaries going out with their partners and catching up with folks at a function. And there isn't enough of that in Toronto for my liking. Because it would be nice, just to hang out with people of your own age group. Go into a situation where you listen to some old tunes and everyone kind of got the vibe, So I must say I miss that aspect of things.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, when we dive into the mix, we can get some of them vibes recreated in the session, yeah? It's been a pleasure, man.
Absolute pleasure.
Nice one.
That went really quickly.
Yeah, I know, man. I know.